Kia ora no tātou. E ngā maunga e tū nei roto e te rohe o Tamaki Makaro. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. E manaaki ki nei koutou I tēnei wā. E nā awa, me nā moana e rere nei ki kei tēnei wāhi. Ka nui te mihi ki a te koutou hoki. Me ki a koutou te iwi, Ngāti whātua, Horake. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Koutou mā kua te mei nei I tēnei wā. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā kata koutou. I thank our President, Henry Carruthers, for his kind introduction and for the wonderful celebration we had last night. It was a privilege to be involved, and it was just a wonderful celebration of the years of the profession. We also thank Frank Boffer for his wise observations this morning and the early images of practice. Our next speaker, Dr. Diane Menzies, was present in that wonderful 1975 photo of the early profession and has since led the profession at both national and international level. Diane will reflect on our second 25 years. Tēnā koe, Diane. I invite you to address the conference.
Tēnei te mihi ki a ranganui rā ko Papatūā nuku, nā mātua o nā ātoa, nā kakiaki o nā mea katoa. Ka mihi ki nā mate o tēnei tau rātou kua hinga atu rā, rātou kia rātou, haere atu rā, ka hoki mai anō ki tēnei wā. Nā mihi ki a Ngāti whātua ōrākei, koutou ko Ngāi Tai ki Tamaki, ko Ngāti Pāua, ko era atu. Hapu iwi e noho nei ki e whakanuia nā manaakitanga ki au iwi. Nā mihi ki nā manuhiri, nā whenua kai tārai, ka tairai, nā whenua kai takuturanga, nā kai ako me nā tauira, tēnā koutou. Ko tēnei au e mihi atu ki a koutou marae o koutou whare tūpuna o koutou manga awa a wahi tapu. Tēnā ka mihi atu ki a koutou. Ko waiau, ko manuaru te monga, ko te ārai te awa, ko horauta, ko tākitimu nā waka, ko Ngāti Kaipoho te hapu, ko ronga whakata te iwi, nō te whanganui a tāra, nō reira ke Tamaki Makaurau tō kāinga. Tēnei au. Tēnā koutou huiri noa ki te motu, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings all. I'm here to celebrate the recent 25 years of landscape architecture in Aoteraoa, New Zealand. Tuia Pito Ora, New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects, is the home of the profession I've been part of for most of my life. I'm passionate about landscape architecture and about our basis, Papatūā nuku. She is the whenua landscape, all landscape, and nurtures us all. This is a personal story that spotlights events, organisations and people who have influenced the changes in training, skills, values and practice. This story is told in the context of changes from a tightly linked group of almost evangelical practitioners, largely employed by government departments, to independent commercial consulting firms with a diminishing role in central government. The changes are from a monocultural practice to one which includes bicultural planning and design and greater diversity. Tuia Pito Ora, the organisation is changing for greater emphasis on professional services and governance, on less on volunteer management. However, the profession remains small. here as well as internationally. It's clunky. A profession requires sound leadership. Many professions have established greater public recognition and respect through the wisdom of their leaders, such as Sir Mason Jury in medicine, Dr. Moana Jackson in constitutional law, Sir Miles Warren in architecture, and Dr. Frank Boffa in our profession. Our executive leaders on contract or as staff are also invaluable, keeping our house sound and well maintained. Heather Titchener, Anita Fulton, Melanie Whitaker, and Vicky Clark are those to whom Tuia Pito Ora owes a huge debt of gratitude. Those who have also volunteered their time have enabled our profession to thrive. Landscape Architecture has an organisation which represents the profession globally. As you've heard, the International Federation of Landscape Architects, IFLA, represents 77 national associations comprising some 40,000 members. Our profession is an evolving one, responding to the global and local environment, such as increasing urbanism and climate change. Let me tell you a little about IFLA, because if you are a member of Tuia Pito Ora, you are a member of IFLA. IFLA is a democratic, non-political professional body. There is only one association member of IFLA per country, and the focus is on education policies and training, an annual student competition, regional and world conferences, and promotion of the profession. In 1998, the period I'm talking about, IFLA celebrated its 50th birthday, and I was elected as the regional secretary. After 11 years as regional secretary, secretary general, and president, I had travelled to over 60 countries, to Russia, China, the UK, and the US many times, and to support landscape architecture where help was needed, such as Bosnia, Peru, and Palestine. This was one of my early duties as IFLA president, a conference opening with white gloves. Clunky again. The lack of gender diversity was a frequent issue, but I loved the white gloves. Promotion to raise the profile of the profession was an opportunity to showcase the work of award-winning projects in New Zealand, such as Megan Raitt and Christine Jeremiah's work on water management. Landscape colleagues were generous with help in supplying details, drawings, or images when needed for speeches. An example is the speech on landscape architecture as a passionate profession. I called for help in the Tuia Pito Ora newsletter just before Christmas and was happily surprised when I received 13 stories from passionate landscape architects. So thank you all of those who responded. I shared your stories in Dubai, Barcelona, and other places. Alan Titchener, a Tuia Pito Ora president, was a regional vice president of IFLA, earning support for promotional activity in the diverse Asian region, and was respected for his warmth and honour and humour. Renee Davies, another Tuia Pito Ora president, was later the convener of an IFLA World Conference in Tāmaki Makaurau in 2013, and several Tuia Pito Ora members have contributed to IFLA working groups. Dr. John Clement wrote a newsletter for IFLA for several years. Mike Barthelme has been a loyal delegate and IFLA regional secretary, and Dr. Bruno Marks from the staff of Victoria University of Wellington has just become IFLA's newest president. Tuia Pito Ora members have worked in other countries and sought out international challenges because we've been geographically isolated. Online meetings with practitioners through webinars and other platforms, which IFLA, Ngā Aho, the Māori Designers Network and other groups are promoting, are now further expanding opportunities. But looking back, way back to 1769, after sighting the headland of Te Kuri, the bark Endeavour arriving in Tūranganui a Kiwi was on the east coast. The European colonisation of Māori lands is the background for our profession's adoption of a bicultural approach and increasing cultural competence, bringing us to today. The story includes Te Tauanuku, the Māori members of Tuia Pito Ora, who are members of Ngā Aho. However, European memories of the rocky days of colonisation, when the Treaty of Waitangi was ignored, Māori had their lands stolen and tribes were shackled by poverty and illness, have been suppressed. Many of European descent know very little of our nation's history. I did British history at school when I was there, and have had infrequent contact with Māori culture, values and communities. Lives have been lived separately. Few Pākehā know that the invasion of the Waikato by the Colonel Cameron-led British troops commenced prior to the trumped-up excuse for the invasion. Few are aware of the shocking attacks on defenceless Māori families, or the shootings and burnings of Māori in the village of Rangiaowhia, a village that had been negotiated as a safe haven. My own tribe, Rongawhakaata, was invaded by Captain Cook, shot and killed, children kidnapped, and later had thousands of hectares stolen for farmer settlers. Today, Māori are some of the most economically deprived. This amnesia will change, and I hope for greater social justice and equity. This is O Maka Marae and Te Tauanuku. Our profession is one where Western values were the profession's values. This was the same for medicine, law, as well as other design professions, and it's taken us a while to address this lacuna with integrity. The lack of critical Māori member mass encouraged Māori landscape architects to foster a memorandum of understanding between Ngā Aho and Tuia Pito Ora in 2015, and this is maintained today. While we as a nation have a long way to go with fluency in te reo and cultural understanding, as has our profession, we have come a considerable distance in the past 25 years. The wānanga for Auckland Landscape Architects, hosted by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and our awards evening are indicators, you'll see, indicators of that. Also, the student wānanga yesterday. Aoteraoa is gradually but slowly changing as well. The turbulent times in New Zealand's political history in the late 1980s and 90s, such as government restructuring, as Frank mentioned, the global economic crash, and Ruth Richardson's infamous mother of all budgets, were behind us by 1998, and the country was relatively prosperous, although of course this was not equally shared. A key influence on the practice of Tuia Pito Ora members was the Resource Management Act 1991. Dr. Tony Jackman represented the Institute at the Select Committee stage of the bill, and the views of the profession were heard. Landscape planning and design advice at regional and local government level has since been significant. In 1988, When I was on the senior management team of the new Ministry for the Environment, a planning retreat was held to forecast the future for the ministry. No one anticipated that a very short time later, the same team would be briefed by the Environment Minister, Sir Geoffrey Palmer, on the new law he sought. 10 years later, in 1998, regional and local government had largely completed the first round of plan changes under the new legislation, and landscape planning had grown and has continued to grow over the recent 20 years. The strategy of the Resource Management Act 91 was more on enabling change and development and less on setting a clear vision for the future and enhancing our social, biological and cultural environment. Rural New Zealand was not a focus of the previous planning legislation, which followed British models, but the RMA had a broad oversight where landscape architects could make a contribution, and most of our members did so. After 30 years of the RMA to respond to many issues, including the devastating impacts of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution of our waterways, a major new law change is underway. This divides the RMA functions, with one forecast to be a Natural and Built Environment Act, the NBA. An area of the RMA to which members made a significant contribution was an assessment at local and regional government level, and when decisions were appealed in the Environment Court. I had taken time out to go sailing and working overseas, and on return after completion of a doctorate in resource studies, was appointed to the Environment Court in 2001 and was a commissioner for 11 years. I heard the frustration of colleagues in the court over landscape architects following case law rather than taking innovative and culturally inclusive leadership. Landscape architects held different views about methodologies which were contested, so that in some appeals there were perhaps landscape consultants providing conflicting opinions to the court. Joint witness statements and hot tubbing has been a way for the court to address this. The collaborative work on landscape assessment for Tuia Pito Ora's publication, Te Tangi o Te Manu, on the desk here, is a positive change towards co-design and greater cultural inclusion. The 1998 seminal conference, Today's Actions, Tomorrow's Landscape, produced a financial gain. Frank Boffa proposed to apply some of this for the formation of a charitable trust for landscape architecture education. The aim was to bring those who were professional leaders to Aoteraoa to share their knowledge widely. Professor Robert Thayer agreed to a speaking tour to debate his ideas on bioregionalism, and he was followed by Professor Joan Nassau, as you've heard, and then Professor Mario Shetnan, an urbanist, architect and landscape architect from Mexico. Mario and his wife travelled to small cities such as Rotorua and Queenstown, as well as the main centres. I remember his arrival to talk to design and development professions in Queenstown on a Friday night just prior to an election. There was a modest group in the room as the lights dimmed and Mario started showing images of his inspiring urban work. When he concluded, the lights were switched on and the room was packed, including the city's mayoral candidate, and yes, he was elected the next day. All the overseas experts who were brought to New Zealand gave their time to our profession and our colleagues, and we owe them thanks. The Landscape Foundation website was used to raise issues for critical commentary, and at a time when Tuia Pito Ora preferred not to have a public profile on landscape issues. This was to avoid offending a practice that may have been commissioned to work on an issue such as the proposed filling of Auckland Harbour for commercial port operations. The Foundation tested opinions and issues of concern, and a book was the outcome. Kia Whakanuia Te Whenua People Place Landscape was published last year and judged second in the Christchurch Heritage Book Awards. Over 24 years, the Trust has brought different ideas about landscape management to our small towns as well as main centres, and will continue with new initiatives that include storytelling for the next generation. 3 areas of change are important for the profession of landscape architecture in the recent 25 years. They are education, culture, and collaborative practice. Landscape architecture education programs have expanded in breadth and all have different origins and strengths. There have been some notable successes, such as Jackie Bowring being awarded the first PhD in landscape architecture in Aoteraoa in 1998, and Dr. Wendy Hoddinott, a Lincoln University student at the time, was awarded first prize in the IFLA Student Design Competition in 2006. Victoria University of Wellington was awarded second equal placement out of 100 schools for their work in natural and cultural heritage in Barcelona in 2014. The Institute's education policy, including accreditation standards, has expanded to embrace Te Ao Māori, and Māori landscape architecture graduates are now passing on their knowledge in the education programs, but this is not always well resourced and is slow progress. Culture is at the heart of landscape architecture, as landscape is the cultural construct. The vital importance for Te Ao Māori cultural recognition has been more recently appreciated and is now adding richness to the profession's capabilities. We still have much to learn, and this is taking place within a context where racism and racial inequality is a continuing issue. But we're learning to understand diverse perceptions through different lenses. I'm frequently reminded by kaumātua that our professional language comes packaged in Western concepts. Place making, one of them commented recently, can't be about Māori places, because in our ancient practice, we are part of place. It is our whakapapa, and we work with systems. It's a relationship held in trust, not a dominance. We also have some way to go in understanding and dealing with what we term nature, another cultural construct. In another aspect, that's because it's an integrated part of us all. Also, we have way to go in cultural landscapes, which currently scarcely feature in our resource management laws. My view is that we've been mentally seduced by our legislation in New Zealand, which holds that nature is separate and important to the exclusion of other thinking. The third recent change in professional practice is that of collaboration. While a characteristic of landscape planning and design in Aoteraoa has been humility, design change that seems to change, that no change occurred, we've largely avoided grandiose impositions on the landscape as professional statements. And we maintain, though, some competitive focus, which tends to produce a discordant effect in cities as each firm or person designs a separate site. Such designs win awards, even though they may have been foisted on a community. But a collaborative style is developing in practice, which is demonstrated with several key firms working together, linking narratives in the city. This has been fostered by the Auckland Council, and Mana Whenua have been part of the work, with the collaboration managed by Phil Wihongi. I hope this successful change will be maintained and extended. What of the future? Can we develop an inclusive Aotearoa practice through much better support for students and enhanced Te Ao Māori education? Equally pressing, can we take active steps every day to avert the Titanic of climate change destruction and environmental degradation, using all knowledge available, collaborating closely with other professions and with communities? One of our members, Craig Pocock, has made his mission addressing our carbon impact over a number of years. So thank you, Craig, for your leadership. We must now look to all possible wisdom to address the changes to our environment, including urban intensification as well as global impacts. Can we undertake constructive dialogue on landscape matters with key decision makers? The Malaysian Landscape Architects Association make what they call courtesy calls each year with key ministers to share goals and issues. Our duty to address climate change and other issues could be more effective by working together on shared goals with our political leaders. I conclude this reflection on 25 years of the landscape architecture profession with a wonderful quotation from Oscar Wilde, who said, "Any place that we love becomes our world." The founding members and all of those who have contributed to the professional association through countless hours of tedious meetings, writing, collegiality and conferences have done so because they love the landscape. Papatuanuku to some of us, and passionately maintain careers because it is about our world. This is Robin Kahuki with painting of Papatuanuku. Thank you, Frank. There is a Māori proverb, hoi poi a te kākano kia puāwai, nurture the seed and it will blossom. The seeds of our profession, sown by Charlie Challenger, George Malcolm, Frank Boffa, Tony Jackman, Neil Aitken, Robin Gay, Earl Bennett, and others 50 years ago are beginning to bloom. We remain small and need to continue to nurture our seedlings, our students, and continue to promote and collaborate in practice. Our educators at Lincoln University, Victoria University, Wellington, and Te Pūkenga Unitec are key to this endeavour. Professor Simon Swaffield, Jackie Bowring, as well as Nada Tuia, Associate Professor Matthew Bradbury, Doctors Victoria Chance, Hannah Hopewell, and Bruno Marks, and to all who are members of Tuia Pito and our colleagues, let's work much more closely together in the coming years so that our size is not a barrier and so that our world will continue to blossom. Tēnā koutou, huri noa ki te motu, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā rawa, tūkoe, thank you. And finishing off